There is a curious paradox about the human heart. It is both a small private theater and a vast cosmic ocean. Most of our lives are spent in the theater, lighting the stage, rehearsing the same roles, watching the same little dramas as if they were the whole story. Then, sometimes without warning, the curtains fall. The actors vanish. The stage collapses. You may stand in the ruins and feel, for the first time, unmade. This is the dark night of the soul, not a curse from the gods, nor a random malfunction, but a radical stripping away of the props that held up the identity you relied upon. Imagine you've been wearing a suit of clothes for decades. Names, professions, opinions, the little narratives you hand yourself like jewelry. One morning the mirror cracks and you see a different face. One less each layer can dress up. Terrifying? Certainly. Necessary? Often. What dies in the dark night is not your essential being, but the imagined self, the ego that thinks itself as a permanent thing, as a fortress against life's uncertainties. When this fortress falls, you are naked to existence, and nakedness, as philosophers and mystics have known, is a kind of truth-telling. This experience is often felt as bewilderment, anguish, grief. It can be a loss of love, a failure of health, a collapse of a career, or the dread of meaninglessness. The mind screams for explanation. What happened? Who am I now? What will I do? And offers the usual remedies. Explanations, blame, frantic repair. But the dark night refuses these banal fixes. It is not a problem to be solved, but an invitation to be present with what is. Presence is the art of attending without armor. It is the quiet witness that notices pain, not to fix it, but to let it speak. In that listening, something else begins. There is an ancient image, a seed buried in the black soil. To the seed, that darkness looks like death. In time it dissolves and becomes the very compost that nourishes the shoot. The dark night is composting. It turns your treasured certainties into the nutrition for a new life that does not repeat the old illusions. The metaphoric death is brutal. Grief is the language of the heart, and it deserves the tenderness of tending. Do not hurry this process. The quick fix is the ego's last gasp, and it will try to patch the wound with new titles, new relationships, new opinions. The wiser movement is to stay with the grief, to allow it to cleanse. Notice how, in the panic of loss, the mind clings to identity by rehearsing stories. I am the one who succeeded. Now I am a failure. I was loved. Now I am abandoned. The mind tries to stitch continuity where there has been rupture. Yet the cosmos has a different sewing. It sews discontinuity into continuity, tearing away the old seams so that a new pattern can emerge. One not made of roles and performances, but of simple presence and deeper openness. And what is presence? It is the gentle noticing of what is, without the immediate overlay of judgment. It is being aware of your breath when the world shakes. It is the capacity to hold pain without immediately turning it into something else. To watch the tide of emotion like a spectator at the edge of the sea, not to drown, nor to command the waves, but to feel their rhythm and know the shore will remain. Presence is not an achievement of the ego, but the native clarity that is revealed when the mind ceases to monopolize consciousness. There are practical ways to cultivate this. Attend to your breath. Sit with sensations. Name the emotions without attaching to them. This is grief. This is fear. This is aching. By naming, you create a tiny distance. By watching, you create space. In that space, the ego's stories lose their compulsive grip. They are no longer the whole of you, but transient weather passing through a vast sky. It is hard at first, like learning to watch your thoughts without being dragged along. But with practice, the habit grows. The dark night also reveals the shapelessness of being. We like to think of ourselves as separate islands carving identities. But when identity crumbles, the interconnectedness becomes painfully clear. You are not a singular, isolated entity. You are a node in a living web. Loss is not only personal. Perhaps a job ends, and you feel bereft. Yet you remain interwoven with friends, family, memory, nature, the countless small kindnesses of strangers. In this universality there is a strange consolation. Your pain matters because it threads through the larger fabric. You are an echo in a chorus. Do not misunderstand. The consolations of the dark night are subtle and do not annul suffering. They simply change its quality. In the old way, suffering is a personal wound. In the deeper shift, suffering becomes a teacher, a doorway, an initiatory trial. The metaphor I like is of the pearl. The oyster, irritated by a grain of sand, secretes layer upon layer until a pearl is formed. The irritant did not vanish. It was transformed into beauty. Your wound may be the catalyst for such formation. This is not to romanticize pain. Pain can be cruel and senseless, but to recognize that human beings have an extraordinary capacity to transform the hurt into meaning. Now, the temptation in the dark night is to become spiritually fashionable. You may meet gurus, quick spiritual aphorisms, or people offering clever techniques that promise immediate relief. Be cautious. Some approaches are like cheap anesthesia. They numb the pain while leaving the underlying infection. True transformation requires a depth of presence, and sometimes the presence is not sweet. It is rough and plain, like sitting in a dark room with a candle. The candle is you, small, steady attention, and the room is the interior world. Do not trade that candle for a narcotic of distraction. What about ego dissolution? The ego is not an enemy to be annihilated with heroism. It is an adaptive structure that served certain purposes. To be free is not to destroy the ego, but to see it for what it is, a temporary arrangement of thought. When you step back and observe the ego's maneuvers, its anxiety, its cleverness, its hunger, you can use it skillfully rather than be used by it. Think of the ego as a servant who thinks he is the master. The work of the dark night is to reassign him to his proper role. There will be moments of terrifying emptiness where choices seem meaningless and the future vague as fog. Resist the urge to fill the emptiness with compulsive activity. Instead, practice dwelling in the unknown. There is a subtle quality of freedom in not knowing. In art, the blank canvas is not a problem but a possibility. Likewise, the space left by collapse is pregnant with possibilities that the old identity could never have imagined. You cannot anticipate what will emerge. That's the point. Life is an improvisation, and the dark night forces you into a new score. And then there is the companion called gratitude. Strange bedfellow indeed. How can gratitude exist amid pain? Perhaps because gratitude is not the opposite of suffering, but its wise companion. When you notice a small tether of grace, a friend's hand, a warm cup of tea, the sunlight on the wall, gratitude begins to reweave your inner world. It does not deny reality. It adds nuance. In the dark night, gratitude becomes a revolutionary practice. Even in the center of loss, you can find things that are tender and true. A final word about meaning. Many rush to conclude the dark night is meaningless, a cosmic mistake. To them I say, meaning is not something you invent like decoration. It is more like a clarity that reveals itself when you stop polishing your surface. When the ego dies, your life is less about proving yourself and more about responding. Meaning then comes as a byproduct of presence, of being with others, of serving without agendas, of creating from an inner silence. The life that grows after the dark night is often quieter, less status-driven, more attuned to the simple fact of being alive. So what practical map can you take into this terrain? A few simple directions. Sit with what is. Do not run immediately to explanation or escape. Breathe and return to the felt sense of your body. It anchors you when the mind spins. Name emotions without clinging to their stories. Be gentle with yourself. Grief is not a failure, but a process. Avoid quick spiritual fixes. Favor steady practices that cultivate presence. Look for small threads of beauty and gratitude. They are lifelines. Allow your identity to be refashioned by life rather than by fear. Remember, the dark night is not a punishment but a passage. It is a kind of spiritual surgery. Uncomfortable, messy, but potentially life-giving. When the new self emerges, it is not a new mask, but a fresh way of inhabiting, being less defensive, more alive, more capable of love that is not merely possession. In the end, the mystery remains. You cannot predict exactly how the dark night will transform you. Perhaps you will become softer or less afraid to fail. Perhaps you will lose something you thought indispensable and gain a spaciousness that was previously unimaginable. The invitation is always the same: to be present, to listen, to let your life unfold, without the tyrant of past identity dictating every movement. So let the night do its work. Tend your inner flame. Watch, listen, and be willing to be unmade so you may be remade. The world is vast, and in your unmaking you may find a vastness of your own, a wild, tender freedom that was always waiting beyond the curtains of the old self.